Republic P-47 Thunderbolt European Theatre Combat Debut. April 1943, April 8, 1943. 7 miles above the occupied French commune of Caen, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermischen commanded his Focke-Wulf 190A5 at 27,000 feet. The veteran pilot from Jagdgeschwader 26 observed through his canopy as unfamiliar silhouettes labored upward through thin air. Intelligence briefings had described the new American fighter entering operations over Western Europe, but seeing the aircraft in person prompted incredulous reactions among Luftwaffe personnel. Hermischen transmitted to his wingman, describing the approaching formations as ungainly and unsuited for aerial combat. Below his position, 16 Republic P-47C Thunderbolts from the 4th Fighter Group climbed in standard tactical formation. Each aircraft's Pratt and Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, strained against the fighter's unprecedented weight of 7 tons at combat loading. German fighter pilots, experienced against Royal Air Force Spitfires and Soviet Yak fighters, considered these American machines poorly designed. The P-47's barrel-shaped fuselage, greenhouse-style canopy, undersized wings relative to fuselage bulk, and propeller diameter exceeding Luftwaffe standards suggested aerodynamic inefficiency. What Luftwaffe intelligence failed to predict was that these characteristics would prove advantageous under specific operational parameters. The P-47 carried armament unprecedented in fighter aviation: 8 Browning M2 50-caliber machine guns, 4 per wing. Ammunition capacity totaled 3,400 rounds, 425 rounds per gun. Combined cyclic rate reached 6,000 rounds per minute. At convergence distance of 300 yards, this weapons array could structurally disable a Messerschmitt Bf-109 within 2 seconds of sustained fire. Major Donald Blakesley commanded the 335th Fighter Squadron that morning. The former Eagle Squadron veteran had transitioned from RAF Spitfire operations weeks prior. Blakesley understood that P-47 combat doctrine required abandoning conventional fighter tactics. The Thunderbolt's design philosophy diverged fundamentally from European lightweight interceptor concepts. While German engineers prioritized climb rate and turn performance, Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, a Georgian émigré, had conceived a high-altitude platform emphasizing mass, engine power, and concentrated firepower. Among the 56 American pilots flying that day were several who would achieve ace status, though on April 8, 1943, they faced the world's most experienced fighter force with 0 combat sorties logged. If you appreciate evidence-based World War II history presented with precision, please like and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment indicating your location. We enjoy hearing from viewers worldwide. Republic Aviation P-47 Development Program. June 1940 to May 1941, the P-47's genesis traces to June 1940. As Wehrmacht forces overran France, Alexander Kartveli received urgent specifications from United States Army Air Corps headquarters. Requirements called for a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching Luftwaffe fighter performance parameters. Kartveli's design exceeded these requirements substantially. The aircraft will resemble a dinosaur, Kartveli informed his engineering team at Republic Aviation's Farmingdale, New York facility. However, it will be a dinosaur with proper proportions. The XP-47B prototype completed its maiden flight on May 6, 1941. At 9,900 pounds empty weight, it exceeded its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer, by 65% in mass. The turbo supercharger installation, featuring complex ducting through rear fuselage sections, created an unusual appearance. Test pilots encountering the prototype questioned its flight capabilities. Performance testing demonstrated exceptional characteristics at altitude. The R2800 double Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial configuration producing 2,000 horsepower, maintained rated power output at 27,000 feet, where German fighters experienced significant performance degradation. The turbo supercharger system, driven by exhaust gas energy, delivered sea-level air density to the engine at stratospheric altitudes where conventional mechanically driven superchargers proved ineffective. Major Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially expressed negative assessments. His unit suffered 18 pilot fatalities and 41 aircraft losses during training operations between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 demonstrated dangerous handling characteristics, ground loops during landing, torque-induced rolls during takeoff, and compressibility effects in high-speed dives where control surfaces lost effectiveness as shock waves formed. Pilots who mastered these characteristics discovered extraordinary performance. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, later achieving 27 aerial victories, described his initial flight experience as comparable to controlling a locomotive, emphasizing unprecedented power delivery. U.S. Army Air Force's P-47 initial combat operations. April-May 1943 first combat engagements during April and May 1943 confirmed Luftwaffe tactical assessments. P-47 units could not match Focke-Wulf 190 turn performance, could not match Messerschmitt Bf 109 climb rates at medium altitude, and lacked agility advantage. German pilots developed exploitation tactics, attacking from below where heavy Thunderbolts struggled, forcing turning engagements where maneuverability dominated, and disengaging vertically where P-47 acceleration proved insufficient. Hauptmann Josef Pips Priller, Jagdgeschwader 26's commanding officer, submitted post-combat reports to Luftwaffe headquarters. His assessment characterized the American fighter as vulnerable, describing flight characteristics as truck-like, with poor turning radius and inadequate climb performance. Loss statistics supported German confidence. First operational month recorded 14 P-47 losses, against 3 confirmed Luftwaffe aircraft destroyed. Royal Air Force observers, operating Supermarine Spitfire squadrons from British airfields, privately suggested American reconsideration. British pilots joked that optimal P-47 evasive maneuvers involved unstrapping and moving around the spacious cockpit interior. However, combat damage analysis revealed significant data overlooked by Luftwaffe intelligence. Shot-down P-47s had absorbed extraordinary punishment before structural failure. One aircraft from a May 4th mission returned with 21 20mm cannon strikes and over 100 machine gun impacts, damage levels that would have destroyed Messerschmitt or Spitfire airframes. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable liquid cooling systems, continued operating despite battle damage that would have stopped inline engines immediately. When P-47 pilots achieved proper gunnery solutions, results proved devastating. The Thunderbolt's weapons convergence created a destruction zone unprecedented in fighter combat. Unlike rifle-caliber armament of early war fighters or cannon with limited ammunition capacity, the American fighter maintained sustained fire exceeding 30 seconds, substantial duration in aerial engagement timelines. Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson, P-47 combat damage survival. June 26, 1943, June 26, 1943, over Lazo, France. This engagement would fundamentally alter Luftwaffe perceptions. Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson, 61st Fighter Squadron, flew in a formation of 48 P-47s returning from bomber escort duty. 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, executed a textbook bounce attack. Diving from solar direction with speed advantage, Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at formation rear, received concentrated fire from multiple attackers. Initial combat seconds inflicted catastrophic damage. 21 20mm cannon shell impacts, shattered canopy, hydraulic system failure spraying fluid into cockpit, engine cowling separation, and fire erupting behind instrument panel. Johnson sustained shrapnel wounds to nose and leg. Attempting bailout, he discovered the canopy jammed. A 20mm shell had detonated in the canopy track mechanism, welding it closed. Trapped at 27,000 feet in a critically damaged aircraft, Johnson faced circumstances that should have resulted in immediate fatality. What followed challenged every assumption about combat damage tolerance. Despite oil-covered windscreen eliminating forward visibility, violently shaking engine barely producing power, and intermittently responsive flight controls, Johnson leveled the aircraft and oriented toward England. The P-47 continued flying with damage that would have reduced any contemporary fighter to falling debris. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 pilot, identity never definitively established, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the English Channel at 170 miles per hour. Historical research suggests several possible pilot names based on German combat reports, but conclusive identification remains elusive. The German pilot positioned astern and opened fire with 4 20mm cannon and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to execute evasive maneuvers, could only rely on armor plate protection. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load. The German pilot repositioned and fired again with machine guns only. Cannon ammunition exhausted. The German pilot pulled alongside, observing the flying wreck. Johnson clearly saw his opponent's face, young, blonde-haired, expression shifting from confidence through confusion to apparent fear. The German repositioned and expended remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flew. The German pilot pulled alongside again, shook his head, rendered an informal salute, and departed, presumably ammunition depleted. Johnson's P-47 reached Manston Airfield with engine failing during landing rollout. Ground crew chief discontinued damage counting after reaching 200 bullet holes. One cannon shell had detonated inches from Johnson's head position, another detonated against armor plate behind the seat. Engines sustained direct hits. Control cables were partially severed. 3 of 4 main longerons, the fuselage's structural backbone, were shot through. Yet the aircraft had returned him safely. U.S. Army Air Forces P-47, Tactical Evolution. July-August 1943. Johnson's survival transmitted shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers examining the wreckage realized they had underestimated their own design's capabilities. Luftwaffe intelligence, receiving combat reports from Jagdgeschwader 26's 2nd Section, initially rejected the reports as impossible. No aircraft could withstand such damage. Testimony from multiple German pilots confirmed the impossible had occurred. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to exploit the P-47's actual advantages. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, 56th Fighter Group commander, had discovered operational doctrine through trial and error. Instructions to subordinate units emphasized: avoid turning engagements, avoid climbing engagements at low altitude, exploit mass and power advantages, exploit weapons superiority. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially perceived as disadvantageous, became a tactical weapon. In diving flight, no Luftwaffe fighter could maintain pursuit. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 reached 550 miles per hour, exceeding any German fighter's maximum dive speed. This velocity could be converted to altitude gain through zoom climb maneuvers, leaving pursuing aircraft helplessly below. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin, achieving ace status among first Americans in European theater, developed what became known as boom and zoom tactics, though pilots termed it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Rather than engaging in traditional dogfighting, P-47 formations climbed to 30,000 feet, altitude exceeding German fighters' effective operational ceiling. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, Thunderbolts rolled inverted and dove, reaching speeds making deflection gunnery impossible for defending Germans. At dive bottom, American heavy machine guns fired. German pilots who survived described facing a wall of projectiles. Combined firepower created an impenetrable destruction zone. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't merely fall, they disintegrated. U.S. 8th Air Force Schweinfurt-Regensburg, raids August 17, 1943, August 17, 1943. The dual raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg represented the deepest penetration into German territory attempted to that date. This mission demonstrated both the P-47's limitations, range even with drop tanks, and its effectiveness when properly employed. Major David Schilling, commanding the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110 destroyer aircraft positioning to attack B-17s with heavy cannon and rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less maneuverable, served as the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into attack dives from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Bf-110s who survived, provided testimony during POW interrogation. According to post-war records, Roth stated the American fighters descended rapidly. He opened fire at 800 meters, observing strikes on the fighter's wing. The P-47 maintained trajectory without deviation. When the American pilot fired, the aircraft ahead disintegrated, not shot down, but destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage, tail section severed, crew compartment shredded. Within 2 seconds, the Bf-110 ceased to exist. 8 Messerschmitt Bf-110s were destroyed in under 60 seconds. German pilots had never experienced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds weighing nearly 900 pounds. At convergence distance, typically 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic trajectories intersected in a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faced 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself demonstrated American industrial capacity. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds per 20mm weapon, American pilots could maintain fire exceeding 30 seconds. Standard combat loading mixed armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in patterns designed to destroy and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, achieving 28 victories as top American ace in Europe, described the effect. When all 8 guns struck target, aircraft didn't merely descend, they exploded. Gabreski observed a Bf-109 literally severed, tail falling one direction, nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what happened. U.S. Army Air Force's P-47, high-altitude performance, September-October 1943 by. September 1943, the Luftwaffe discovered another reality about the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained rated power output to 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, experienced significant performance degradation above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encountered this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190 A6 sluggish and unresponsive in thin air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, struggled for oxygen nearly 6 miles above Earth. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, German fighters were vulnerable. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot progressing toward ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he identified Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf with elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report stated clinically, opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection angle, observed strikes along entire fuselage, enemy aircraft exploded, no parachute observed. Philipp's death transmitted shock through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on eastern and western fronts, couldn't survive against Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? German High Command ordered immediate investigation into P-47 capabilities. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached sound barrier limits. Its armor included 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, 1/2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbing, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. Republic P-47D-22, paddle blade propeller variant. January 1944, January 1944. A new P-47 variant began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller with paddle blades, 13 feet in diameter, with broad chord blades that bit into air like massive oars. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic, where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at 2,200 feet per minute at sea level. Paddle blade variants achieved 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also improved acceleration, allowing P-47s to build energy faster in level flight. Hauptmann Heinz Knocker of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during bomber interception near Hanover. His combat diary recorded, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us to 30,000 feet. Schmitt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the Thunderbolt's sound. The distinctive thundering roar created by blade tips reaching supersonic speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported identifying approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble signifying death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. Standard configuration carried two 108-gallon wing tanks or one 75-gallon belly tank, extending range exceeding 1,000 miles. With paddle blade propeller providing improved performance even when loaded, Thunderbolts could fight on equal terms immediately after dropping tanks. U.S. 9th Air Force P-47 ground attack operations, April-June 1944 A's P-51. Mustangs arrived to assume long-range escort duties in spring 1944. P-47 units increasingly focused on ground attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition began in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. Standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate top armor of most German vehicles, while sheer volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst delivered 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck, but the addition of bombs and rockets transformed the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry two 1,000-pound bombs under wings and a 500-pound bomb under fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand. Post-war accounts described them coming in low, so low pilots' faces were visible. The sound was terrifying, engines roaring, rockets screaming. Then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader 2, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported the sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. His unit attempted breaking through at dawn, 12 fighters from his grouper. Fischer was the only return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In weeks following D-Day, P-47s systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. U.S. 9th Air Force P-47 Anti-Infrastructure Campaign. June-August 1944 statistics from June 1944 alone were staggering. 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives destroyed, 3,847 trucks destroyed, 512 tanks and armored vehicles destroyed, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability to respond to Allied advances. Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat, reinforcing vehicle armor, deploying more anti-aircraft guns, developing new camouflage techniques. Nothing worked. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and firepower made them nearly unstoppable. Even feared 80 mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's qualities were perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh conditions of Pacific warfare. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, developed tactics specifically for the Pacific theater. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over WWII, shooting down 6 enemy planes himself in a single mission, earning him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to fighting nimble but fragile American fighters, were unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying, streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. The P-47N, developed specifically for the Pacific, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending range to 2,350 miles. This variant would escort B-29s to Japan, proving that the short-legged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon." U.S. Army Air Force's P-47 versus Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter. November 1944, perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's evolution, came in its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its 540 miles/hour top speed, should have been untouchable by propeller-driven fighters. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could catch jets in 2 situations: during takeoff and landing, when jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, never saw the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns opened at 400 yards. Meyer's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. The concentrated fire of 8 50 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under certain conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47Ms, shot down 2 Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized firepower over speed. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers, that's when we get them." Luftwaffe Operation Bodenplatte. New Year's Day 1945, the ultimate demonstration of American industrial might, came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially succeeded. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot brought to the command post pointed at the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte. Including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders, these losses they could never replace. The Americans lost 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, all replaced within 1 week. Republic Aviation P-47 production statistics, 1942-1945. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed 1 Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 individual components machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. Yet American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision exceeding peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, ammunition consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding through synchronized gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was enormous. Each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, up to 300 gallons in combat with water injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. All of it shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more impressive than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, more than Germany had trained in the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat, including 100 hours in advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, were entering combat with less than 100 hours total time by war's end. U.S. Army Air Force's Pilot Training Program, 1943-1945, the quality showed in combat. American pilots arrived in Europe trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemies' capabilities and limitations. They knew their aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals that German pilots never received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, exemplified the American training advantage. He had 420 hours in his logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47. He'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, and studied gun camera film from actual combat. His first mission, he knew exactly what to do. The German pilot he faced couldn't have had half his experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. In March 1945, Oberstleutnant Josef Priller, the same pilot who had mocked the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years earlier, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to boost morale. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication, revealed the complete transformation in German attitudes. According to declassified post-war records, Priller stated, "The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed." But beyond the machine is what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose one, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. Luftwaffe fighter force collapse April-May 1945. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant facing P-47 formations that owned every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. He saw them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. He tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. His aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded. The wing separated. He barely escaped. In the parachute, he watched them destroy his entire Staffel. 6 fighters gone in under 1 minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. German pilots developed what medical officers called Jabo fever, physical symptoms of stress appearing when Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. The distinctive thunder of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops who knew that survival meant finding cover immediately. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt Final Combat Statistics. 1943-1945 final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed, 68,000 trucks destroyed, 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 900 vehicles destroyed, 150 locomotives destroyed, countless barges, ships and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. Thunderbolt units achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial combat while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these numbers lay the human cost. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces. Many fell to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had over 200. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center at Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence. Records captured in 1945 revealed German assessments of Allied aircraft. The file on the P-47, updated continuously throughout the war, showed complete reversal of opinion. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment: minimal threat. December 1943. Exceptional high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength. Firepower increasingly problematic. Pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment: significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber. superior to all German types above 20,000 feet, firepower devastating against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment: critical threat at all altitudes, March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war, combination of firepower, durability and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment: unsurvivable in direct engagement. Post-war assessment: German Luftwaffe. General Adolf Galland, 1985. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His response, recorded on video, captured the complete transformation. According to archival records, Galland stated, "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat," we said. "They built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win." They were right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, the visibility excellent, the controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany produced. Yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. The P-47's design represented American industrial philosophy perfectly. Brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered and over-engineered. The wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount could withstand 12 G forces. The control cables were doubled throughout with automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel of engineering. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds, fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during high-G maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude. Each gun had its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. The convergence was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, allowing pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. Republic P-47, Thunderbolt technical analysis and historical legacy. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 won through quantity, not quality, that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numbers. The combat records tell a different story. In engagements where numbers were equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved more effective in actual combat. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed why cannon shells, while individually more destructive, required precise aim and had limited ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds total. The P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets that guaranteed hits even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst placed at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, enough to ensure destruction. The ammunition itself was superior. American 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds used a delayed action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structure. German 20mm shells, while heavier, often exploded on surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power than entire bomber formations from the previous war. Its weapons delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry, yet it was built by the thousands, flown by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who learned their trade in weeks. The transformation of German opinion from mockery to terror took less than 2 years. In that time, the flying milk bottle became the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones decades after the war. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Its placard lists specifications and battle honors, but the real story is told by a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under fire. Below the display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot, taken from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them, fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you, and you ceased to exist." The laughter died with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In between, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots had laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.